At some point today, you are going to look at someone else's life and feel something shift inside you. Maybe it will be a photo on a screen. Maybe it will be a colleague mentioning a promotion. Maybe it will be nothing more than a stranger walking past you looking more confident than you feel. And for just a moment, something in your chest will tighten. A quiet voice will ask a question you did not choose to think. Why them and not me? You will probably tell yourself to stop. You will remind yourself that comparison is the thief of joy. You have heard that line 100 times, and yet the next time it happens, the voice comes back anyway. Because that voice is not a personality flaw. It is not jealousy. It is not weakness. It is something far older than any of those words. And understanding where it actually came from might be the only thing that gives you any real power over it. Your brain was not built for the world you live in. It was built for a world that no longer exists. A world of small groups, scarce resources, and a social hierarchy where your rank in the tribe determined almost everything about your survival. Who ate first, who got protection, who found a mate, who lived long enough to pass on their genes. In that world, knowing exactly where you stood relative to everyone around you was not vanity. It was survival intelligence. A brain that constantly tracked status, measured gaps, and noticed who had more was a brain that stayed alive. That brain is still inside your skull. It has barely changed. And it is running the same ancient software in a world that has become almost unrecognizable. The psychologist Leon Festinger first named this in 1954 when he published his social comparison theory. His core idea was simple and a little unsettling. Your brain is doing it the way your heart pumps blood, not because it chose to, because it was built that way. But Festinger studied people in small groups, colleagues, neighbors, friends, a contained social world where the comparisons, however uncomfortable, were at least bounded by reality. Now look at what comparison means today. You wake up and within minutes your brain is measuring itself against hundreds of people it has never met, bodies it will never have, careers that took decades to build, highlight reels carefully curated to show only the peaks and never the valleys. It evolved to handle a tribe of roughly 150 people. Now it is trying to process millions, and it has no mechanism to understand that what it is seeing is not real life. It just sees signals, more successful, more attractive, more admired, and it responds exactly the way it was designed to respond 200,000 years ago. Upward comparison, measuring yourself against people who seem to have more, and downward comparison, measuring yourself against people who seem to have less. Upward comparison tends to produce motivation in small doses, but anxiety and inadequacy when the gap feels too large or too permanent. Downward comparison tends to produce a short-term boost to self-esteem. Your brain reaches for whichever tool matches the threat it currently perceives. In a small ancestral tribe, this system worked. If someone in your group was a better hunter, noticing that gap pushed you to improve your skills. If your status dropped, the anxiety it generated was a signal to change behavior before the consequences became irreversible. The discomfort was information. It was functional. It was pointing at something real and actionable. But when the person you are comparing yourself to is someone you will never meet, whose circumstances you will never fully understand, whose apparent success exists in a context completely invisible to you, the discomfort stops being useful information. It becomes noise, a smoke alarm going off in a house with no fire. The signal is still firing. The action it is supposed to prompt is no longer available, and you are left with the feeling without the outlet.
This is why scrolling through certain feeds can leave you feeling hollowed out in a way that is difficult to explain to someone who has not experienced it. You did not lose anything. Nothing in your actual life changed. But something in your brain registered a status gap it would have generated 100,000 years ago when falling behind in the tribe carried real consequences. Exclusion, hunger, danger. Your nervous system does not know the difference between a real threat to your position and a curated image on a screen. It never evolved to know the difference, because the difference did not exist until about 15 years ago. What makes this harder is that the brain's comparison system is asymmetric. Losing ground feels worse than gaining ground feels good. This is sometimes called loss aversion in the context of money, but the same principle applies to social standing. Urgency belonged to the threat, not the opportunity. So you are not imagining it when comparison feels more like a wound than a warning. That asymmetry is real, it is biological, and it is not something you can simply decide your way out of. But here is what actually helps. Not the advice to stop comparing entirely, which is neurologically about as useful as telling your heart to stop beating. What actually changes the experience is context. Research on social comparison consistently shows that the emotional impact of an upward comparison drops significantly when you understand the full picture of the person you are comparing yourself to. Not the highlight reel. The actual story. The failures that preceded the success. The costs that came with it. The parts that were never shown. Your brain's comparison system is running on incomplete data. It is measuring your entire internal reality, including your doubts, your fears, your private struggles, against someone else's external presentation. That is not a fair comparison. It was never meant to be a fair comparison. The system was built for a world where you actually knew the people you were measuring yourself against, where you could see their struggles as clearly as their strengths. The next time you feel that quiet tightening in your chest, the one that asks why them and not me, you are not broken. You are not weak. You are running an ancient status detection system that kept your ancestors alive in a world where knowing your rank was the difference between eating and starving. That system is still working exactly as designed. It just has access to more data than it was ever meant to handle, and almost none of that data is giving it what it actually needs to settle down. What it needs is context. What it needs is the full picture. What it needs is something your screen will almost never give it. There is one more layer to this that almost never gets discussed. The comparison drive does not operate in isolation. It is deeply connected to something called the social brain hypothesis, an idea developed by the anthropologist Robin Dunbar and others, which argues that human intelligence did not evolve primarily to solve abstract problems. It evolved to navigate social complexity. A significant portion of your cognitive capacity is dedicated entirely to tracking other people, their intentions, their emotions, their status, their opinions of you. In that context, comparison is not a bug in the system. It is one of the system's core features. The discomfort it generates is not random. It is a precisely calibrated signal designed to keep you socially engaged, motivated to maintain your standing. In the ancestral environment, a person who felt no social discomfort, who never noticed status gaps or felt the pull to close them, was a person who drifted to the margins of the group. And the margins of the group, in a world of predators and scarce resources, was a dangerous place to be. So the system that makes you feel inadequate when you see someone doing better than you is the same system that once prevented your ancestors from being left behind. It kept them close to the group. It kept them striving. It kept them connected. The pain was the point. The problem is not the system. The problem is the environment the system now operates in. An environment of infinite upward comparisons, carefully edited to remove all context, delivered at a speed and volume that no ancestral nervous system was ever designed to handle. You are not failing at the human experience. You are experiencing the human experience in conditions it was never built for. Understanding this does not make the feeling disappear, but it changes what the feeling means. It is not evidence that you are falling behind. It is evidence that something very old inside you is still doing its job, scanning the horizon, tracking the tribe, making sure you are not invisible. It has been doing this job for 200,000 years. It is not going to stop now. But maybe you can learn to hear it for what it is. An ancient signal. Not a verdict, not a fact. Just a brain doing what brains were built to do in a world that came along far too fast for biology to keep up. And the next time you look at someone else's life and feel that shift inside your chest, you might actually know what it is.